Fallout 4 has a lot of strange places. Many of these are revealed to us in tantalizing icons on our Pip-Boy. However, many are hidden away. These are the places that we stumble upon accidentally, sometimes whilst fleeing from a foe, sometimes because we want to see where a weird unmarked leads, as is our nature. Places like these frequently don't even have so much as a name to describe them, leaving us to wonder, where in the fuck am I? Well, today I plan to shed a light on 5 of these locations, starting with this charming church located west of the Citadel, tucked away behind a few buildings. Its graveyard is full of radioactive waste, which means that at some point after the war, someone was using this as a dumping ground. This also explains the presence of the feral ghouls that we come across here. Ghouls that, unfortunately, I've already murdered. The only way we get in is through the basement, which is the only part of the church accessible to us. So, in we go. Inside this basement, we find a few odd things, not the least of which is the clusterfuck of shenanigans occurring at the back. But first, when you walk in, you will hear the familiar sound of one of those cheerful and creepy Symbols monkeys, this time just chilling like a villain in a cabinet with a teddy bear. It is here we ask ourselves if this is just a whimsical display put together by whomever was responsible for everything else down here, or is this one of the many burrs that it was used by the developers in interim of a child's corpse? Probably the former, but maybe, just maybe, the latter. As we turn our attention to the back of the room, we find a motorcycle, a pile of corpses, a fridge, and a portrait of the very cat perched on the corpses, Toffee Pot, molester of neutron stars, along with an offering made to her. I kid, of course. What this actually appears to be is much less sinister. It's just a cat shrine that someone has made, with offerings of food, possibly indicating that whomever was responsible views the cat, or cats in general, as a deity of sorts. The pile of corpses would indicate that this person is also a murderer. Now, you might think that this could just be a simple grave robber. However, the clothing, the corpses, and the blood makes this unlikely. This then begs the question, how long have these people been here? Unless they're meant to be gunners or possibly institute scientists, which I find unlikely, then the clothing would indicate pre-war, or at least from the same time period, victims. Overall, it does seem likely that all of this is a shrine. However, the time scale of when this happened due to the nature of the corpses confuses things just a little. Though, if this did happen so long ago, how the fuck is the cat still alive? Our next location is one that I've been asked to cover in the past, but didn't think it was large enough to warrant a whole video. That place is Prost Bar, located beside a previous location we covered, Swan's Pond, where we learned the sad story of the behemoth that lurked within. Today, however, we turn to a happier place, one of drink, in which everyone knows your name. Immediately, by the furnishings we can see on the inside, we can tell that this bar seemed to have some sort of patriotic theme. It's also apparent, from the chairs and the tables, that this place was either in the process of being closed up, or in fact was closed up, when whatever happened here, happened. The patrons who were here at the time don't seem to have fared much better than the bar did. The first example of this being this poor bastard here, who seems to be in the process of downing a pitcher of beer, all on his own sim. Or he could have just been using the placing of said pitcher to discreetly creep on the woman at the table opposite here. Note again the chair on her table, which she didn't even bother to move. Either one of those two could have been the parent of the baby that was, supposedly, in this carriage at one point. The alternative is someone just rocked up here with a stroller, which is, well, that's just plain fucking creepy. Moving to the bar, we see the remains of a few more patrons that haven't fared much better than the last two. This chap looks like he died mid-pint, with a glass that I assume didn't spawn where it was meant to, and is likely the one located about 1/5 of a meter to his left. Beside him is a candle, another thing I want you to keep in mind along with the chairs. Behind the bar, we see one of 3 things. Either the remains of 2 people who, instead of drinking in their final moments, decided to be together, reaching out to one another. A beautiful thing to see. The alternatives are either everyone else came in, saw them dead, always thought they'd make a cute couple, and so posed them like this in death, or they both reached for some money at the same time, and were likely unsuccessful in its acquisition. For all we know, it was this bitch right here, who either worked here or jumped behind the bar when she saw everyone was dead. I can't really fault her for that, to be honest. Alternatively, she could have been just trying to clean a really small smudge and just needed a closer look. Now, these last two gents are where a bit of the inspiration for this location comes from. A little Easter egg of sorts. Prost means cheers in Polish, and this individual is a mealman. This means he is likely meant to be from the sitcom Cheers, which, shocker, involved a bar. Many of the other corpses here may be homages to other characters that starred in said sitcom, which is many, many years old at this point. I'm talking Woody Harrelson pre-Zombieland old. Clearly, the drinking prowess of these two gentlemen was so great, their skeletons kept at it long after they cast aside their mortal coil. You might be of the opinion nuclear Armageddon should have affected their pose, but we will soon be getting to that. We can find a few more candlelit tables, and a few in the process of being tidied away, again suggesting that this bar was already being closed up, or already was, when it all kicked off. Moving into the manager's office, we can see that they were not the best at keeping an orderly filing system, as it has all just been fucked into a corner. This is, as some of you may be aware, not a great way to keep records. For those of you who do it like this, you know I am right and you should feel bad. Also, it appears the manager was a bit of a daredevil, given the fact that they played catch with bombs disguised as baseballs. They may have just really hated their kids, and or their dog. Also, take note of the box of candles. Moving down the hall, we come to a toilet. Within, lurking behind said toilet, is perhaps the culprit of all of this. A solitary plunger, looking just a little bit too innocent to be anything other than fucking guilty. The last room has a candlelit snooker table, and this is really where my theory on what happened here comes together. When the bombs dropped, it was way too early for a bar like this to be opened, and even if it was, there would be no need for the amount of candles. The lights should have worked just fine. Moreover, we can assume that these corpses wouldn't have maintained their poses after all these years. I posit that some, maybe not all, but some of the people here were among the oddly high number of people that survived nuclear fire in the Commonwealth. They lost everything, and came here to drink themselves to death, lighting some candles to give themselves a smidgen of light. How they survived is unknown, though if that Mirelurk claw is one that a patron mounted, then it appears that they were capable of time travel, given that Mirelurks were a considerably post-war creature, and wouldn't have been around to mount on a pre, or even just slightly post-war watering hole. But mounted it was, and drink they did, toasting perhaps fallen friends, family and foes alike, drinking to forget, until they could go and join them. The next place we are going to look into is right here, east of Wallen Pond. It is a shack for a cat lady and her cats. There's not much more to say apart from that, to be honest. Based on the kennel and bones, the cats do seem to devour weary and unsuspecting travellers, possibly without the knowledge of their owner, who themselves doesn't really seem to have much in the way of dialogue. They appear to be just a simple trader, albeit one that loves cats, based on the number of them and the portraits. Perhaps they are friends with whomever created the first location we took a look at, or they themselves did. To the right of the shack are 4 graves, presumably for the cats that have passed away, or were eaten by her when food was scarce, because, let's be honest, we've all been there. Our next location is a hardened raider fortification, / charming restaurant for a spot of seafood cuisine. It is located west of Swan's Pond. The sign out the front proudly, and incorrectly, claims this to be Shenleys Oyster Bar. Incorrectly because, unless Shenley is a ghoul, she is long dead, and no longer has an earthly claim to this restaurant or the land they're in. The sign is dotted with corpses and heads, but don't let this fool you. It's just the raiders' way of telling you the food's to die for. The interior of the intersection this building makes with the surrounding ones is well fortified on all fronts. The doors are well barricaded, and it is well lit. Oddly enough, there are even more heads mounted in here, and this makes no sense, as any patron that is coming here for delicious food will have already got the message. It also doesn't make any sense, as it won't scare off anyone who already seen the heads outside and wasn't fazed. They also don't seem to be the biggest fans of mannequins, but then again, who is? They are spooky fuckers. Now, let's take a look at the inside. The kitchen, while falling into disrepair, would have still served the raiders well, as it's not like a decently stocked one is exactly common anymore. It is also not common in this case, as the greedy shites have completely cleaned the place out. Or someone else did before they showed up, and they just liked the defensible nature of the location. Either of these could in fact be the case. Moving up the stairs, we see a very interesting Easter egg at the top. This poor cunt. Now, from the handcuffs, the saw, and the severed arm, it is likely this is a reference to the movie Saw, where an individual is forced to cut off someone's hand to get off a pipe. However, in this case, it looks like they just cut off the whole arm at the shoulder. This tells us this person was a fucking moron. Cutting off the arm at the shoulder joint would require far more work than just severing the hand at the wrist, obviously. He doesn't seem to have gotten far, so it appears he died for his stupidity. Or some mad bastard cut their own arm off to get away from this guy. If the latter is the case, then given the lack of a body, we can assume they escaped. And if so, I have nothing but respect for them. Back outside, there isn't much to see. The raiders set up a sniper's nest, and we'll get a little loot for our troubles, and a few insights into the type of restaurant a group of raiders would run. Maybe not the best, but my Yelp review, due to the ambiance, will not be too particularly negative. Our last location is the best way to finish this video. A location that provides a lot of questions, but honestly, not much in the way of answers. A strange place located in an old subway station, possibly long abandoned, located south of the Old North Church. As we go down the stairs and enter the station, on the left and right, we see some shit by, I'll tell you. Cage fighting to the right of us, and to the left, the remains of some people who lost a fight with a train, though to be honest there isn't really anyone who wins one. The first gent seems to have either been ejected at such velocity his clothes were torn off of him. Either that, or as he lay down, he decided he was a little too hot and stripped naked. Behind him we can see a man draped over a turnstile that either halted the acceleration of his body from the train, or it stole his money. Not a great death, whichever way you choose to look at it. The last poor soul is just completely fucked. He either died on impact or lay paralysed and starved to death. I kind of hope it was the latter. Lastly, we find a woman who either managed to crawl some ways before expiring, or managed to beat the first guy in terms of distance travelled once she was ejected from the train. If she did, good on her. To the door to our left, we find the employee break room / ticket kiosk area. Here, we see a site that I'm hoping was post-war, because if not, these subway workers were into some hardcore shit. Someone's hand has been pinned to the table with a knife, and then either they severed it, or someone else did. Possibly due to cheating at chess, and possibly over the caps that can be found to the left of the hand. I wasn't able to find a corpse that this belonged to, so it isn't unreasonable to assume that they are long gone at this point. Back in the main room, we will now address the madness that is this cage, starting with this trash can. There are two bodies here, one beside that looks like it may have been a spectator seated on the chair, and the other in the can. It appears they were disposed of, likely due to losing in the competition going on inside the cage. Inside said cage, we find several skeletons, some, oddly enough, still with blood on them, and a few weapons lying around, such as a chair. It seems these individuals were forced into here, or perhaps they chose to be, and fought each other. Either way, this was probably over money. Given the lack of an exit, and the state of the spectators, it seems unlikely any of them, even if there was a winner, managed to get out. The spectators seem to be having a whale of a time, drinking milk, eating cereal, wearing fedoras, the works. I really fucking hope that bar wasn't a stand-in for a child, or then this dark situation takes an even worse turn. What is odd, however, is that they seem to have been betting cash. The reason I find this odd, as the severed hand and back seems to have been over caps. Given the age and the cash, that leaves two possibilities for the timeline on which this could have occurred. This was either shortly after the bombs hit, and the cash was still seen to have some value, and the cap scenario happened separately. They set up in here and ignored the bodies. Option 2 is that this was pre-war, and this was a disused subway station. They ran illegal death matches here, and then the bombs hit. The subway car ploughed through the wall, and then this lot died, either via rapid radiation poisoning, suffocation, or some other means. If it was post-war, then the man in the middle may have just betrayed everyone and killed them, then sat down himself, and with his money, waited to die. Either way, It's a great area to really get the speculative juices flowing, which is exactly why I covered it. Hey folks, been over a year since my last video. I know, I am sorry about all that. I will give an explanation, but for now, I built a new PC, had issues with it, and then COVID happened. I am sure you can all relate to that. I hope you still enjoyed the video. Different from some of my previous ones, but still in a similar vein to the content you love. I aim to be more regular from now on. In the meantime, if this is the first time some of you are seeing me back, even before the last brief comeback, go check out my Sijic Order and Ghoul video. I think they're pretty good. I'll be back soon with more content. Until then, I hope you all keep well in this trying time. Goodbye.